Before we begin, I mentioned last time that I also included this poem in the handout as a comparison. Now that you have read Lady Lazarus and Daddy, which are both very intense, you might even say dark poems, it could be interesting to go back and read Morning Song, which is basically about she's admiring her baby in the morning. It's a very light and loving poem, which shows that Sylvia Plath is not all full of darkness, right? She's also a very tender and loving mother. In fact, I'll even read it to you. Morning Song. Love set you going like a fat gold watch. The midwife slapped your foot soles, and your bald cry took its place among the elements. Our voices echo, magnifying your arrival. New statue. In a drafty museum, your nakedness shadows our safety. We stand round blankly as walls. I'm no more your mother than the cloud that distills a mirror to reflect its own slow effacement at the wind's hand. All night your moth breath flickers among the flat pink roses. I wake to listen. A far sea moves in my ear. One cry, and I stumble from bed, cow heavy and floral in my Victorian nightgown. Your mouth opens clean as a cat's. The window square whitens and swallows its dull stars. And now you try your handful of notes. The clear vowels rise like balloons. Isn't that cute? She's describing how her baby breathes and talks and how he I guess it's a he looks and sounds. What a cute little poem. Okay, now let's talk about the dark stuff. Question 1. Who is Lady Lazarus talking to, and why do you think this? A few groups took this question, and they all agree that this speaker is talking to all those people looking on as she commits suicide again and again. So if you look at, for example, line um, where was it? Okay, 26. The peanut crunching crowd shoves in to see them unwrap me hand and foot, the big striptease. So people coming in who want to watch her. Then if we jump down to line 43, thawing is an art like everything else. I do it exceptionally well. I do it so it feels like hell. I do it so it feels real. I guess you could say I have a call. It's easy enough to do it in a cell. It's easy enough to do it in Stay Put. It's the theatrical comeback in broad day to the same place, the same face, the same brute amused shout, a miracle that knocks me out. So it seems like she's talking to the people who enjoy watching her do this. And in a sense, this also includes us, the reader, because we're reading a poem about how the speaker enjoys performing suicide because people expect her to do it and like watching her come back. Isn't that exactly what we're doing? We're watching her describe, I think it was 3 or 4 suicide attempts, and we're watching her describe the experience of coming back and how people react to it. And we're reading it as a quite powerful poem. We're enjoying the artistry of these words and these images. Just like the audience, the addressee in this poem, we are also turning her suicide attempts into entertainment, we are also metaphorically eating our peanuts and getting close up to see what's going on in this poem. Now, uh, is this crowd seen as positive or negative? And that really depends on question 2, which is today's most popular question. Uh, I Dying is an art. I do it exceptionally well. I do it so it feels like hell. I do it so it feels real. Most groups agree that this probably means she doesn't actually want to die. If I do it so it feels real, that means that it's not real. So she doesn't actually want to die. Instead, it looks like she wants to have that audience reaction when she comes back alive. Uh, right. So if she feels excited by this and the audience also wants to see her do this, is the audience the bad guy? Or is the speaker herself doing it to herself? There's one key image in this poem that gives us a clue as to how the poet, not the speaker, the poet, the writer, feels about all this. And it is the fact that the audience is described as Nazis. Now, the central image here is the fact that Nazis sometimes took the skin and bones and body parts of their victims and turned them into objects for everyday use. And the idea here is that in a similar way, the audience in this poem is turning the fact of the speaker's suicide and possible death, and therefore possible body, taking that and turning it into something useful or beneficial or even just kind of uh, let's call it fun for the audience themselves. It's using her death and using her body for light entertainment. But if the most direct comparison to describe this attitude is to say, like, you're just like the Nazis, then this probably is not a good attitude to have. So she's doing this for her own excitement, but also because of encouragement from the crowd. And the poem tells us this is probably not a good thing. And if we, the reader, are also part of the crowd like this, then the poem is also telling us we should reconsider how we feel about this poem. It is it's an incredibly well written and powerful poem. It gets at the heart of the experience very, very clearly. But in appreciating this poem, in understanding it, in analyzing it, are we not, in fact, also kind of celebrating the fact that Sylvia Plath killed herself? If the writer of this poem did not kill herself in early middle age, if in fact she lived to be 91 and was surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great grandchildren, would we feel the same way about this poem? Maybe, but I think we would feel a little different. And this is like part of the power of this poem, right? The poem is at the same time describing what's happening, and it's also saying to the reader, you are part of the problem. All of literary history that enjoys this poem is part of the problem. As a literature professor, I always like it when people talk about the power of literature and what literature can do to you and how it could help you and make you a better person and whatever. But poetry can also hurt you. Literature can also be painful. It can also make you face your own humanity, make you face your own imperfections, your own guilt, your own limitations as a human being. This is one of those poems. In any situation you find yourself, there will always be things that you do imperfectly. There will always be people who feel like you did something wrong to them, or that there could have been a better way for you to handle some situation. It's unavoidable. There is no situation where you will do everything perfectly for everybody. So this poem is a good reminder of that. I still teach it because I think it's worth reading, it's worth thinking about, it's worth analyzing. But at the end of the day, every time we teach this poem, we are adding to the problem. The real question is, do you think it's worth it? And question 3 is about the last 2 stanzas. Nobody took this question, so let me just explain it to you. Ha ha ha. So we've talked about how the speaker enjoys the audience response whenever she comes back from a suicide, right? So the last 2 stanzas. Her God, her Lucifer, her means Mister. Beware, beware. Out of the ash I rise with my red hair, and I eat men like air. Ah, I love this ending. Okay, so she's telling God and the devil to be careful. Why? Because like a phoenix, she will rise from the dead. And the last line, I eat men like air, it could be talking about men, it could also be talking about humans. It's like um, people that you expect me to be afraid of, those people should be afraid of me. Because uh, God and the devil are the two who have power over life and death. But not in this case. The speaker controls her own life and death. So she feels, every time she comes back from the dead, she feels more powerful than God, more powerful than the devil, more powerful than the most powerful man on earth. Only I can control my own life and death. And today I choose life again. So this poem actually has a single, we call this a narrative through line. There's one central story happening in this poem. And it is from the beginning when she discovers the idea of death uh, in line 35. First time it happened, I was 10. It was an accident. The second time, I meant to last it out and not come back at all. So the first, and then a bit earlier, it said that this is number 3. So we now have a kind of plot, how the speaker first discovered death, how she at first really wanted death. She thought that that was what she wanted. But from the audience reaction to her coming back the first time and the second time, she realizes what she really wants is that audience reaction. How everybody is therefore paying attention to her, everybody is focused on her coming back to life. And that gives her a sense of unlimited power. And so we have a series of puns here that I think is really interesting. A miracle that knocks me out. So as I said earlier, it knocks me out means it makes me feel very excited. But it literally, of course, it means uh, it makes me faint. It makes me like unconscious again. So the fact that somebody sees her coming back to life, throws her back to death is the joke here. And then the next few lines is also a pun. There is a charge for the eyeing of my scars. The word charge can mean a fee. You have to pay to watch this. It's a show. You have to pay. But charge can also mean an electric charge. There's a feeling of power, a feeling of excitement, of energy whenever somebody looks at my scars. There is a charge for the hearing of my heart. It really goes. So, yes, I really am back alive. And there is a charge, a very large charge, for a word or a touch or a bit of blood or a piece of my hair or my clothes. This logic is the logic of the Catholic saint, 天主教圣人. The traditional belief is that if you pray to like a vial of saint's blood or like a saint's holy bones or some holy cloth worn by a saint, that you will be healed of your illnesses, your problems will be solved, that kind of thing. So she's basically calling herself a saint. So her doctor, so her enemy. Mr. Doctor is Mr. Enemy, the doctor who uses medical knowledge to save people is using this doctor is doing the opposite of what the speaker is doing. The speaker is coming back to life by sheer force of will. She comes back to life because she doesn't want to die. Anyway, like this is a really great poem. I encourage you to read it from the top very, very closely. I'll come back to it if we have time later. But first, let's move on to question 4, the next poem. Every woman adores a fascist. What does the speaker mean? This is today's second most popular question. And there are two ways to explain this, right? The first way is to say that in a patriarchal society, women are expected to adore, love, and obey the main man in her life, regardless of how terrible that man is. And in a sense, that is true. Women are expected to do this. Um, right? Like, you've seen the news stories, right? When two famous celebrities break up, how often does the man get the blame? How often does the woman get the blame? It's not an equal distribution. Usually the man only gets blamed after there's actual evidence or reports that he is not a good man. But if there's no real evidence, people or the news and the culture tends to blame the woman more, which is not fair. So yes, it could be a description of patriarchy, but we can flip the logic around. The poem is called Daddy. It's about the speaker's father. It's about her relationship, her attitude towards her father. So every woman adores a fascist could be saying that every father is kind of like a fascist in the way that, again, in a traditionally patriarchal family, the father is usually the parent who goes out to work, brings in money and resources and information from outside. He is traditionally the one who penetrates the safe environment of the home and brings in outside influences. And because of these outside influences, including cultural influences like patriarchy, that is part of his source of power and authority in the family. Like the uh, stereotypical traditional father who says, I don't have to do any housework because I do all the real work. That kind of attitude immediately puts the man as outside of the family. And so it's kind of like he's bringing these ideas and like invading the family with these ideas. So in a traditionally patriarchal family, every father is kind of like a fascist. Now, if we pay close attention to this poem, we'll realize that it's not really about the father figure's behavior. He doesn't really do anything really bad, right? He's just kind of like there, and the speaker keeps talking about him, describing how she feels about him. But he's not a real person in this poem. The most we get is that he speaks a little German. His language is different from the speaker's language. Uh, and she uses that as a kind of starting point to say how I sometimes don't understand you. But like, even for your closest family members, there will be times when you don't understand each other. Every person is a mystery. So, in fact, it's not just about like a traditional father. It could be about any father. It could be about any parent. If you think about the distance between a parent and a child, there will always be times when a parent says, "No, you can't do that." And when the child says, "Why?" the parent says, "Because I said so. I'm the parent." And that immediately creates authority and distance. And, if the child were a 20-something-year-old poet, they might even say, "You're a fascist." So while I was discussing this question with one group, I checked online and I found something incredibly surprising. So 2 weeks ago, when I introduced Sylvia Plath, I said that she did not have a terrible relationship with her father. She was not abused by her father. She herself is not Jewish. Um, and I also said that her father is not related to the Nazis in any way. However, recently, like around 12 years ago, uh, some people discovered an FBI file on her father that revealed that, in fact, he did kind of agree with the Nazis. He was politically more a fascist than you might expect. Now, I'm not saying that this is what the poem is talking about, but I am saying that maybe that kind of attitude was felt by the poet in her family. Maybe in like discussions of some sort or in the attitude of Sylvia Plath's father toward other people or other groups, she felt this kind of negative attitude. And combining that with his uh, German Austrian heritage and all of the facts of German history, it could make sense that she would produce this poem that would coincidentally call him a Nazi. It's just one of those crazy coincidences of history, I guess. And then the last question, why is the most common rhyming sound ooh? One group took this question, and we thought about it. We looked at the rhyming words. Look at these words: Jew, you, through, root. If you want, you can even think of foot as one of these rhyming words. And also, where is it? Du, German for you. So using a single sound, the poem can combine all of these ideas. Talking about you, the father, talking about like the German side of him, talking about the historical Nazi connection, calling him a brute, describing his behavior or his attitude in the family. So even when we read a word that's not really related to these ideas, like blue or like to or root, root. Even when these specific words are not related, we're still reminded of these ideas because of the similar sound. It sort of it reinforces this theme in the poem. It's like it's an overbearing, inescapable idea in the relationship between the speaker and her father, which is, of course, part of what the speaker is trying to do, right? She's saying she could never understand her father, she could never escape her father. Her father was always somewhere in her mind. She's always struggling against him in some way. And all of these ideas are tied together because of a very good choice of rhyme. And that's something that really great poetry can do, right? It's not just about the specific words. It's not just about the specific images. It's also about the music, the meter, the sound, and also the relative positions of the words on the page, as we saw 2 weeks ago with some of the modernist poems, right? So even though this poem is much easier to understand than something like Anyone Lived in a Little How Town, in a Pretty How Town, it still takes some of those modernist ideas and uses them to build this poem. Okay, questions about today's discussion? Okay, we have some time left. I'm going to quickly introduce next week's lesson, and then I'm going to jump back and we're going to look at these two poems more closely. Next week, we're going to read 5 shorter poems by 2 poets. We're going to read 3 poems by Audre Lorde, this person. She is a Black lesbian American poet and activist. And so, we've read literature by Black Americans before in this class, but it's different when it comes from a Black woman because for James Baldwin, he of course suffered from racism, but he was gay also, so he suffered from homophobia, but he did not suffer from sexism. Nobody looked down on him and thought that he was less of a person because of his gender. Audre Lorde suffered from all 3. And it's important to her work because she's not just a poet, she's also an activist. She is one of the 2 most influential Black women activists in the United States. The other one is a woman named Bell Hooks, who mostly wrote essays and novels. So it was harder to choose something to read by Bell Hooks. So instead, we're going to read poems by Audre Lorde. And the poems will be related to the experience of being a Black woman within a culture that does not admire Black women. We're going to compare her 3 poems, or two, 3. We're going to compare her poems to 2 poems by another woman, Mary Oliver. Mary Oliver is a white Catholic poet. So her poems are more about like Christian ideas, religious ideas, but not religious in the same way that like uh, early 18th, 19th century poems were religious. Because after all, she is writing in a historical era where religion is less important than it used to be. So the way that her religious ideas come out will be quite different, will not be as obvious, but they are still important to her work. And I think it would be fun to compare the ways that these 2 women understand the world, the way that they view human relationships, and how they look at life similarly or differently. So that's next week. And then the week after that, we're going to listen to Taylor Swift. Okay, so questions about next week? Okay. So let's take a closer look at these two poems. I have done it again. Oh, what a great start. Because it assumes that there's something before the first line. What is it? Again, so it's not the first time. There is an entire lifetime before this first line. 1 year in every 10, I manage it. So this also tells you it happens once every 10 years. A sort of walking miracle. My skin bright as a Nazi lampshade, my right foot a paperweight, my face a featureless fine Jew linen. So here we get the Nazi imagery, we get the using her body for objects. Peel off the napkin, oh my enemy. Do I terrify? Like, do my actions scare you? The way that I look, does my attitude scare you? The nose, the eye pits, the full set of teeth. This is describing a skull, 骷髅头. The sour breath, it's sour because it's the breath of a dead person, right? Will vanish in a day. Soon the flesh, the grave cave ate, will be at home on me. So she's describing how she's coming back to life from another suicide attempt. And I, a smiling woman, I am only 30. And like the cat, I have 9 times to die. So here we also have Jesus imagery, because obviously Jesus is another person who came back from the dead. Zombie Jesus. Um, the story is, of course, he died. They took down his body. They put him in a cave. They sealed the cave. 3 days later, they went over and they saw the grave was opened and the body was gone. So references to death, life, and the grave cave are actually Jesus references. This is number 3. What a trash to annihilate each decade. So again, it's once every 10 years. And it looks like it's once near the end of every 10 years, right? Because it annihilates that decade. What a million filaments. Uh, a, a filament here is talking about like what you use to fill like a false tooth. So she's talking about like she kills herself so many times, the Nazis could turn her body into so many different things, could create a million filaments. We okay. Actually, let's talk about this again. Peanut crunching crowd shoves in to see them unwrap me hand and foot. The big striptease. Striptease, 脱衣舞. It's entertainment where the performer takes off their clothes. And here she's talking about like they're uncovering her dead body. And or you can say taking off her clothes to try to like operate on her to save her. Gentlemen, ladies, these are my hands, my knees. I may be skin and bone. Nevertheless, I am the same identical woman. So the person you knew me when I was alive, I am still the same person. The first time it happened, I was 10. It was an accident. The second time, I meant to last it out and not come back at all. I rocked shut as a seashell. They had to call and pick the worms off me like sticky pearls. I love this line because it has such concrete imagery, right? You think of a dead body in the ground, buried in the earth, covered in worms and dirt and bugs and stuff. Great line. And then, of course, it's the contrast with pearls. Let's see, we talked about this part. In a cell, I said jail cell, but a cell could also refer to the room where a monk or a nun lives. 修士修女的那个卧室. The same brute amused shout. So brute, you know, as a mean and abusive person. But brute originally as an adjective means unpolished and direct. 未经修饰直接的 the same brute amused shout. So like somebody shouts out without preparation, without thinking about it. A miracle. We talked about these parts. So, her doctor, so, her enemy. I am your opus, which means your creation, your work. I am your valuable, the pure gold baby that melts to a shriek. So, a gold baby is, of course, a valuable thing in terms of money and in terms of the symbol. But here she's saying that this is only valuable to you if you destroy it, if you melt the gold, if the baby shrieks. I turn and burn like a roasted pig, right? 插上去的那个猪 right? 可以那个火上转圈圈. Do not think I underestimate your great concern. Ah, that's another great line. Like, think about what we've been talking about, right? Like, you melt me down, you kill this baby that I am, you treat me like a roasted pig. And then you have this very polite line. Do not think I underestimate your great concern. It's kind of like she's like scolding the reader, she's like expressing raw emotions, and then she's like, but I hear what you're saying, and I respectfully hear what you're saying, and I will get to your concerns in momentary time, right? So it's very strong contrast in language. Very direct imagery followed by a very polite line. And so, of course, that makes this line feel fake. Maybe she doesn't actually care about your concern. Ash, ash, you poke and stir. So this is, of course, after the body has been burned, right? There's only ash left. And she's saying the audience is like seeing if there's anything left in the ash. This is also another Bible reference because in the book of Genesis, it says that God created Adam from the earth. And then the religious idea is uh, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. You created from earth, you will return to the earth. Flesh, bone, there's nothing there. A cake of soap, a wedding ring, a gold filling. If I remember correctly, yes. So this is another Nazi reference. So if you're trying to find something in my death, the most you can find, or this action of looking for something in my death, is also something that she uses to call you a Nazi. The Nazis turned human fat into soap. They stole wedding rings and gold teeth from the ashes of their victims. In the same way, you're trying to find something useful from my death. And then, so out of the ash is, of course, the same ash we've been talking about here, but it's also the ash of the phoenix. A phoenix, when a phoenix dies, right, they don't just disappear into the air. They leave behind the residue of what they have burned, the ash. So the ash from inside the ash, if you're looking for something, I have something for you, myself. I rise with my red hair. Well, of course, um, it's a symbol, right? Fire, energy, revenge, even if you want. And I eat men like air. The word eat is also a symbol, like I'm eating you alive means like you can't handle me. God, isn't that a powerful poem? Um, Okay, so that's it for this week. Questions? Okay, so like read the next poems. Let's see, what do we have here? The Woman Thing, Black Mother Woman, and then three by Mary Oliver, Wild Geese, Poppies, and then a poem that's not included in our textbook, The Return. The Return, I should talk about this poem a little bit. The Return is based on Greek mythology. So in one of the Greek stories, King Minos of Crete, uh, his wife was seduced by Zeus. That can't be right. Okay, so for some reason I can't remember, his wife had sex with a bull. And so she gave birth to I think there was a curse involved. She pissed off some god, and the god cursed her to fall in love with a bull. They had sex. She gave birth to a half bull, half man called the Minotaur. In Chinese, 人面, no. 牛头人身兽, something like that. So the king, right? This is his son. He can't kill his son, but he's terribly ashamed of his son. So he decides to hide his son in the middle of a labyrinth, 迷宫. So he hires Daedalus and Icarus to build the maze. Daedalus is the master maze designer, and he brings his son Icarus. They build a maze. They put the Minotaur in the middle, successful. But because they know the maze, they built it, right? They know how to get out. So the king uh, traps them in a high tower to make sure they cannot reveal the secret. And so this is where Daedalus tells Icarus, we're going to make wings and we're going to fly out of here. But because these wings are made from wax, you cannot fly too close to the sun. Icarus starts flying. He enjoys the feeling so much. He goes higher and higher. He gets too close to the sun. The wings melt. He falls and dies. A few years later, Theseus, another Greek hero, is on an adventure. And one of his missions is he has to go and kill the Minotaur. The Minotaur, if you remember, is stuck in the middle of the maze, a maze that nobody knows how to get out of. Like, you can go in, you can find the monster, you can kill the monster, but you can never get out again. So Theseus is thinking, how will he do this? How will he get out alive? And the king's daughter, Ariadne, sees him, falls in love with him, and says, tell you what, I will use a ball of red thread, and I will stand outside the maze waiting for you. You take one end of this thread. And so after you reach the Minotaur and you kill him, all you have to do is turn around and follow the red thread back to the entrance. And for this reason, Ariadne is where we get the Greek term for the scientific name for a spider, arachnid. This poem is about Theseus getting back out of the maze. Okay, see you next week.